2 for anatomy and physiology. So if we look on here, it will give you the scenario, and it says continuing your work placement with a sports therapist, you've been asked to create an informative presentation that could be issued to clients, patients during their visits. Your presentation should inform the reader about the structure and function of the muscular system and link to a variety of sports to reach a wide audience. So the first part you have to do is you must design an informative presentation to illustrate your understanding of the structure and function. The first bit is actually you need to be able to identify each of these muscles. So every single one of these muscles that I've highlighted here has to be identified on a diagram, and you have to be able to not only identify it but tell me the action of the muscle and give me a brief information overview of the location of it. The next stage, as it says here, the next stage is to describe the different muscles. Okay, so the 3 different muscle types: the cardiac, the skeletal, and the smooth. Location, their properties, and the functions. And I'll go through that a bit in a minute. You're then required to do the muscle fiber types, their properties. So type 1, type 2A, and type 2B. You're then looking at the function of the muscular system and how the muscles work in pairs. So we're looking at antagonistic muscle pairs, and we're really focusing on these 4 here, which are the agonist, antagonist, fixator, and synergist. And then finally we're looking at the different contraction types. So we're looking at concentric, eccentric, isometric, and isokinetic. And then if you're looking for the distinction, you are expected to analyze. Okay, so the bit that you have to analyze is the fiber types, the contractions, and the antagonistic muscle pairs. I'll just show you an example of what I've created now, and this is kind of an expectation that you would do the same. So here's the start of my presentation. So like I said, all of those muscles on the list, they'd be expected to be identified on these diagrams, or the diagram that you've selected. You have to identify it yourself. You can't just get a diagram that's already been labelled up. It needs to be blank and labelled up by you. I've started here, so you can see I've got the name of the muscle, I've got the location, and I've also put the action. Each one of the muscles on that list needs to be identified in detail. The next stage, like I said, is the 3 muscle types. So at the moment I've described and explained in detail, so I've gone for that merit. I've described what the skeletal muscle is and how it functions. I would be expected to do exactly the same for the cardiac and the smooth. I've then done a slide on antagonistic muscle pairs. So you can see I've got the agonist, the antagonist, the fixator, and the synergist. I've said what the agonist is, and then I've given the explanation. So I've said how it functions in a specific example. So in this one, for instance, I've said in the upwards phase of a bicep curl, the agonist is the bicep. The bicep contracts to enable the arm to flex at the elbow. When this movement occurs, the bicep is doing the majority of the work. I would be then expected to describe what the antagonist is, and then give an example and apply the example and explain it. The same with the fixator, and the same with the synergist. What I've done as well is I've also put an image, and on this image I've identified where the agonist, the antagonist, the fixator, and the synergist is. I've obviously left some off because I don't want to give you everything. That should say muscle contraction types actually. So let's change that. So I've got the 4 different muscle contraction types. We've got concentric, eccentric, isometric, and isokinetic. What I've done, let's go back to it, is I've described here what a concentric contraction is. I've then applied it and explained it in an example. So here I've said a squat on a downwards phase. On the downwards phase of a squat, the hamstring shortens and the 2 ends of the hamstring muscle become closer together, making this a concentric muscle contraction. So I've explained what a concentric muscle contraction is in an action. I'd be expected to do that with eccentric, isometric, and isokinetic. I've also put an example here for concentric, so if you go into your eccentric, it might be worth doing an example there, isometric and isokinetic, and so on. I've then got to do muscle fiber types. So this is where I've labelled this one wrong, so it should say fiber types. And what I would be expected to do is talk about the 3 fiber types. So type 1, type 2A, and type 2B. So I give an overview here and say what type 1 muscle fiber is, give the key characteristics, describe it, paint that picture of it, give as much detail as I can, and then I'd explain how the muscle fiber type functions. So give detail on how it functions. So for instance, if I'm talking about type 1, I talk about it being slow twitch and that actually it needs oxygen to be able to generate fuel so it can last for a long period of time. And then I talk about which sport is appropriate for it or which activity is appropriate for it and why. I do the same with type 2A and the same with type 2B. If I've done everything in completion that we've gone through already, I should now be sat at a merit. If I want to go for the distinction, these next 2 slides are appropriate for you. So you have to get 3 actions. So here you can pick whatever you want. I've picked Wayne Rooney here, and I'm going to analyse the antagonistic muscle pairs and the contractions that are taking place. And I've actually looked at this leg, the kicking leg here. So you can see that I've put here Wayne Rooney's right leg in this image, extended the knee. If we go into further, we analyse the movements. We will see that the agonist is in the right leg is the quadricep. This is the muscle that's a prime mover and extends the leg at the knee. And I've gone on and I've talked about the antagonist muscle is the movement as the hamstring because it's relaxed while the quadricep does the majority of the work. And then I've put that the gluteus maximus and the abdominals are providing stability, so they must be the fixator, so it allows Wayne Rooney to stabilise that position. And then I've put the synergist would be the tibialis anterior and the gastrocnemius, as it helps Wayne raise his leg or extend his leg with the quadricep. At the bottom here, you can see that I've gone on and I've looked at the contraction type. So I said that the contraction types taking place at the quadricep is a concentric contraction because it's shortened, and then I've talked about the hamstring lengthening, which means it's eccentric. You need to analyse this in detail. Now, the 3 movements need to be contrasting. So here I'm going to do his leg. Here I'd probably do Roger Federer's arm, and then here I could either do an arm or a leg. The beauty of this one, though, is that it's very different to these because when I get to the contraction, she's not actually moving, she's holding that pose, so therefore the contraction type will be very different to these 2 images here. And then I'm on to the next one, which is the analysis of the muscle fiber types. So I've got 3 different athletes, 3 contrasting athletes. I've got Mo Farah, long distance runner. I've got Usain Bolt, sprinter, and I've got Murray. The reason why I picked Murray is because he has a combination of muscle fiber types, more so than these 2 here. And I can see I've done an analysis for Mo, so I put Mo will predominantly have type 1 muscle fiber types. It would consist of around 80 to 90% type 1 muscle fibers, and the remaining 10 to 20% will be split across type 2A and type 2B. But type 1 muscle fibers are extremely important for Mo, as it provides him the opportunity to constantly feed his muscles with oxygen so that they can keep functioning without fatigue. These fiber types are extremely efficient at using oxygen to generate fuel, and this is advantageous when competing in long distance events. And then I've also put actually that Mo will have some type 2A fiber types, and he'll use these in the last lap of the race where he starts to break away from the pack, and this is because his type 2A fibers are firing more powerfully and quickly, and therefore it will supply him or will give him sufficient power to be able to finish the race quickly. What will happen though is those fiber types will fatigue very quickly, and that's the reason why Mo can only use it for 1 lap. Then I talk about Usain Bolt, so he's pretty much the opposite. He would be type 2B, which is the faster fibers. He may have some small amount of other fibers, but you need to talk about why that's important and analyse why it's important for Usain. And then you talk about Murray and the split, so you have lots of different, he might have predominantly, let's say he's got 50% 2A, 20% 2B, or maybe 30% 2B, and the rest type 1. and then you'd analyse why he's got that split and how it applies to his sport, and why it's relevant to him. And that would be your assignment in completion. And if you did both these two sections right, along with the rest of it, then you would achieve a distinction.